Joined now by the former executive producer, Hockey Night in Canada, the co-host of the Bob McCown podcast. Always great to catch up with John Shannon. And have you noticed Coach Tocchet's a little ornery here this week?
Well, a little bit, yeah.
Losses to San Jose will do that to you, although the Sharks won again last night. They beat Washington, so looking better and better with age.
Well, and when you look at it, yeah, the first 12 or 13 games, they were out of sorts. And then those two debacles against the Canucks and the Penguins, that really set everything a flurry in San Jose. Mike Greer had a team meeting, and all of a sudden the team started to play better. So
yeah,
they're still professional hockey players. There's lots of pride in San Jose. So it's not as embarrassing in November to have lost to the Sharks in October. How's that?
Well, especially at home too. At home, their home record is now 5-6-2.
Yeah,
like, that's totally fine.
Very respectable
for a bad team. That's totally fine.
Absolutely. I mean, there were years with the Canucks where they would have died for a close to 500 record
at home. Yeah,
at home.
Yeah.
What did you make of the Kuzmenko benching?
Well, I think it's a consideration to trying to prove a point, and we've seen this around the league. I mean, Kuzmenko benching is not near as dramatic as Goudreau and Laine benchings and non-dressings, but it's the last resort a coach has. If the coach can't trade him, the guaranteed money's there. The only thing that the staff can do is say, "Listen, if you're not going to listen to us, you're not going to play." In my mind, what Rick and the guys are doing are playing with house money. When you have a record like the Canucks do, you're playing with house money, and you better do it our way, or you're not going to play. And I think it was as simple as that. I mean, in the end, the Kuzmenko has not really delivered, I think, a lot of what people thought he would do. Particularly given the opportunity to play with Pettersson and the other Russian winger. Excuse me for forgetting his name.
That'd be former Toronto Maple Leaf.
Former Maple Leaf, Mikheyev, yes. Yeah, I know. I know you
guys ignore things once they leave Toronto, but it was
here's the fascination. I always used to get Mikheyev and Engvall mixed up all the time, and they're not even the same nationality, so that's how bad it was. But Mikheyev, and Mikheyev has come and I think impressed with his speed, and obviously Pettersson's Pettersson. So Kuzmenko had to improve his play and had to pull his weight on that line, and he didn't, and so I don't. To me, it wasn't surprising because as whirling dervishy as he is, he wasn't really providing the offense they expected him to do.
Well, especially not in the way that we expected as well. Like, we've got the receipts on this. I mean, even though he had the spectacular bottom line last year, it's not how we expected him to score goals. He's got a good shot. Right. We thought that he'd be shooting and scoring, not tipping and tapping, which is what he was doing to get to 39 last season. So, he didn't shoot a lot. He doesn't shoot a lot, so you wonder if perhaps he can have a bit of an aha moment there and realize that, he should try shooting a lot like Brock Besser does.
But to me, this relates back to what this coach says and what the previous coach said. And I would submit that Kuzmenko would probably be much more effective under a non-structured system like Bruce Boudreau's, as opposed to one that has a lot more structure like Rick Tocchet's does.
Yeah, potentially. In the meantime, you could also say that as Pettersson goes, so goes Kuzmenko. And
yeah,
we're all looking around going, what is up with Elias Pettersson? And people outside this market might think that's crazy considering he's a top 10 scorer. But we've known from the start, this just doesn't look like normal Elias Pettersson right now. And that might be as big of an issue with Kuzmenko as Kuzmenko is with Kuzmenko.
I think I followed that. But yes, but it's a long season, and the tribulations and the trials that a team goes through, even after the great start the Canucks have had, is something that I'm prepared to give Elias Pettersson as much slack as he needs because we know in the end he's going to deliver. We know over an 82-game schedule, there's going to be ups and downs. And you're not going to perform at that level that he and Quinn Hughes did for the first 15 or 16 games of the season. You're just not. And so those lulls are going to be natural parts of a hockey season.
Moving on from the Vancouver Canucks, what the heck is going on with Corey Perry in Chicago?
You know, I don't want this to become TMZ, but I don't know, and I don't think and quite frankly, in taking phone calls and texts about it, I don't think very many people know.
No, I mean, that must be the case because things leak eventually here, John, and the fact that they've kept the lid on this is pretty impressive, actually.
Yeah, but I you know, it is concerning though that some of the stuff that is out there that, you know, is just trash. It's just trash, and the fact that it gets any traction is disappointing. It's one of those ones where, you know, it's the Chicago Blackhawks, okay, and the Blackhawks don't have the shiniest of reputations.
No,
even though it's a different administration and a different bunch of guys, a different bunch of people in the organization running things. The one thing that I would say is I do think the Blackhawks as an organization understand that now. And I think Danny Wirtz and Kyle Davidson understand that. And they have to put themselves at a higher standard for everything and anything. What they haven't done is the same issue that got the Blackhawks in trouble from 2010 to 2016 was being proactive and transparent. And, you know, you really can't, you can ask for and demand for transparency, but when you don't really know where the story is and what the story is, it's difficult to respond. Well, they should be transparent, but perhaps guys, it's none of our business. Perhaps it's something that is none of our business.
It very well could be the case. If the salacious rumors that are out there, as you say, are trash or untrue, do the Blackhawks have to come out and deny it or say something? And, you know, of course, I am sure that is a meeting that is being happened at United Center right now. What do we do? How do we do it? How do we approach it for all involved? Yeah, I think that, you know, quality organizations are proactive. Quality organizations are transparent. They don't necessarily tell you much, but they try to keep you within the proper parameters.
John, I'll say this, like in today's world of mental health, you know, being recognized far better than it was 25 years ago in this league. I think if this is as you say, something that we just don't need to know about, like, generally, organizations just say he's away for the team for on personal matters, and we'd appreciate privacy, yada yada. They made no such statement.
No, I know.
They said it's an organizational decision, which leads us to believe that it's a disciplinary issue, which I think fans do deserve some transparency about, given especially this organization. You say it's a personal matter. I think everybody respects that and is hands off. You say it's an organizational decision. You're pouring gasoline on the flames, I think.
Yeah. And then yet you read what Pat Morris from Newport Sports says, and says that it's Corey Perry that has stepped away. And, you know, now you've got two different explanations for the same occurrence.
Yeah,
you know, it's difficult to manage, and then what happens is that they give these stories a chance to fester and to grow and to become urban myth more than anything else. Hopefully,
yeah.
Well, I'm reminded of Sidney Crosby's rookie season, and when the Penguins became aware that there were influences around Sidney that weren't always the most positive, they acted quickly to make sure that Sidney was insulated, and I would think the same applies here to Connor Bedard. As for with regards to Blake's question about mental health, we both remember when Rick Rippon would miss games here in Vancouver with absolutely no explanation. Now, at the time, the Canucks were in the extraordinary PR hands of TC Carling, And Alain Vigneault was very well drilled on what to say and what not to say. And I can remember walking back from a Canucks game one day after Rick Rippon had been mysteriously scratched and seeing him having dinner with Kevin and BX and his family. And I went to them and said, guys, like, what happened here? You told us he wasn't well. And then, of course, back then we weren't thinking in terms of mental health. We were just thinking in terms of physical health. And of course, eventually Rick bravely came on out and told the Canucks public, the hockey public, everything that he was going through. And of course, that has turned into a legacy pursuit here with the Vancouver Canucks, first with Mindcheck and then Foundry. So we will continue to await information there on Corey Perry as it becomes available. Dean Evason's a pretty good coach, John. Is this Bill Guerin saying this season's not lost and we need the new coach bounce? Is this the owner just bloody mad with what has happened here in the Minnesota Wild start? And what do you think? Does John Hynes have a chance of getting them back into this?
I don't get a sense that this is an ownership thing. I do get a sense that Billy Guerin's looking at the Western Conference standings and saying, you know, we only have 5 victories, but we're not that far out of the playoffs. And you need that, you need the bump. You know, I think that that's what happened in Edmonton as well. They felt they needed the bump to get back into it. If this was an Eastern Conference team in a similar scenario, maybe it'd be a different answer. But the West is tracking not near as dominant as the East, and there's some volatile playoff positions. I mean, I don't have the standings right in front of me, but I think Seattle's in the second wild card and they're under 500. So the magic number used to be 95. Well, if the magic number is 89 or 90 this year in the West, the Minnesota Wild, the Edmonton Oilers still have a chance to get themselves back into a position of being 500 by the calendar year ends or the All-Star break, and then we'll see what happens. But you knew Dean, and you knew the writing was on the wall for Dean when he started to create some messaging with the local media talking about players' contracts and how much money they make. You know, those are desperate lines trying to have desperate measures. So when he really called out Matt Boldy as he did and talked about that big contract that Boldy signed for 8 years and making big money, including $975 next year, and Boldy has not really played very well, then you knew that there was a disconnect. And that's exactly what Bill Guerin, I'm sure, felt too, that they had to change something. As for John Hynes, I'm sure Billy and John knew each other pretty well in their time in the Pittsburgh organization for Jimmy Rutherford, Hynes being in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania in the American League, and Billy being an assistant general manager. So there was some familiarity there. And if there's some structure that Hynes can bring in the short term, then good for him. But it's going to be an uphill line. Kaprizov, I don't know where he is. They've got bigger issues than 1 or 2 players. They just can't score goals.
Bruce Boudreau went a different direction. He actually kind of defended the guy that replaced him, for heaven's sake. Says, I mean, if you don't have goaltending in defense, you don't have anything. The coach always gets fired. It pisses me off so much. I get so mad. This is Boudreau on the guy that replaced him, for heaven's sake. So once again, he sort of gets it that, it's not personal. This is just the easiest thing for an organization to do, right?
One of the only levers at their disposal to jumpstart.
That's right. Yeah. And we talk about structure, we talk about analytics, but in the end, this is an emotional sport, and all the athletes, when they hear a new voice, maybe the same message, but they hear a new voice, maybe they perk up a little bit. Yeah.
Incidentally, it's the Calgary Flames of all teams on the second wild card, slightly.
Oh, after their victory last night. After their victory last night. That's right.
But you're quite right, John. The East and what it's going to take versus the West and what it's going to take to make the playoffs. If you extrapolate from here, these are two different animals. Yeah. The thing that's interests me about Minnesota is Guerin is very, very active. He likes to make moves. And I do wonder whether you're going to see him try and fix this team with trades next, because if the team can't be fixed shortly, especially with the Suter and Parisi cap hits still lingering on their cap for next season. You do wonder whether this is moving a little closer to a rebuild if things don't get rectified in the immediate term.
Well, or maybe this, and I think I think a lot of us expected the Wild to be like this last year because of the exact thing you're talking about, Matt. I mean, I think it's just over between 14 and $15 million in cap penalties because of Zach Parise and Ryan Suter's contracts, which, by the way, Bill Guerin did not sign, but he took the hit for in buying them out. Perhaps last year was the outlier, and this is the real team. And these guys in these positions they're human too, and they might have got fooled by some of their players the way they played last year. Yeah. Maybe some of the decisions they made in the offseason to get rid of guys like Matt Dumba, not signing him long term. Maybe that's affected things as well. They're in tough. They're in tough. They have a loyal fan base. And I suspect that word rebuild is going to, if something doesn't happen quickly, and I don't know why, and quite honestly, I don't know why it would. I don't know why it would happen quickly. Then I suspect that we will start hearing that rebuild word a lot quicker in Minnesota than people realize.
Well, because one of the things they have the luxury of is they already have a pretty nice collection of young players there. So it may not be the long-term rebuild. I mean, you look at, I know Boldy struggled, but Boldy and Rossi and Faber, and of course in the minors, they have Wallstead, the fine goaltender, and some others. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting situation to watch.
Well, and look at the difference between this year and last year with Gustafsson being so good last year and Gustafsson being the phantom this year.
Yeah. Not to mention, with, Marc-Andre Fleury, if he can get his game back together, Zuccarello, some of the older pieces there, if they did want to move them, you'd be looking at attractive returns, I think, in some cases.
Before we leave Fleury, what'd you make of Mask Gate and the fact that he just wore the mask anyway? The NHL just quietly went about their business and didn't do anything about it. Do you think the NHL is willing to revisit and look at some of these rules they have?
No. I don't. No, I
They're
don't.
Just going to look bad, and they're going to continue to look this bad every time,
and hope we forget about Maskgate.
Yeah.
The problem becomes and even to the subjective nature, what is the mask part of the uniform or not? That's the question. Is the mask literally part of the uniform? And here's the thing: at some times it is part of the uniform, but when it's a Hockey Fights Cancer mask, it's not part of the uniform. It's a league promotion. So where do you draw the line? And I think that and the history of the goalie mask in the game is we as a game have allowed a tremendous amount of personal artistic merit with that actual piece of equipment. So if that's the case, then Marc-Andre Fleury was well within his right to do what he did, and the league probably should not have been as insistent privately. By the way, the league never came out and said a release.
No.
This was all done proactively by Alan Walsh and by Marc-Andre Fleury themselves. And in the beginning, the Wild were rather neutral about it, but then I think they realized that it was probably in the best interest of their team and their player to be able to do it. So they supported him in the end.
Yeah.
So, but that becomes the interpretation of what the mask is. Is it a part of the uniform or is it not? Is it part of your personal preference or is it not?
I think it's the latter. It's been proven time and time again.
The league privately encouraged them not to do this, but we haven't heard from the league since. Have we? Did I miss that?
No. And you won't. Trust me, you won't. You won't.
So you may hear from Walsh or Fleury again.
Do you remember when Oren Koulis and Lenny Barry owned the Tampa Lightning, and they tried to give Mike Smith the saw mask from the movies? That was Oren was trying to promote one of his movies, and the league shut that down rather quickly.
Yeah. Lastly, Patrick Kane has a new home. How much will he help the Red Wings, and who's feeling most left at the altar here?
Oh, I think Florida is. I think Florida expected to be able to do it. I think Carolina really wanted to do something because, you know, Carolina, for all their great things, sometimes they lack some goal scoring. So I think those two teams in my mind, and perhaps Buffalo too, that perhaps they thought they had a chance to get a favorite son home for a year or 2 or 3. But in the end, the reuniting of Alex DeBrincat and Patrick Kane will hopefully put more goals in the net for the Detroit Red Wings and get them back into the playoffs.
Yeah,
and at a reasonable price for the end of the year. So
Dallas and Toronto as well. Were they?
Dallas was in on it for sure. I don't think Toronto was. I think they kicked tires, but I just don't see how they could do it without making other surgery. And the Maple Leafs have too many other needs. The Maple Leafs need to fix the blue line before they try to find another goal scoring forward.
That Atlantic Division, my goodness, like the Senators are basically a 500 team in dead last of the 8 teams. It's
well, and they DJ Smith's got to be careful here now, I think, given where they stand vis-a-vis. As you say,
I hope not. I understand what you're saying, Matt. I hope not. You know, he's a good hockey coach. He's a good coach, and he's good with younger players too. But I'll tell you what, the fan base is quickly. The fan base there has already started to push Staios and Andlauer to do some things.
Yeah,
they were pushing Dorian to do. It didn't take very long, did it?
And the other thing you say, they're in last, but they got 4 games in hand on Montreal and are 4 points back. They got 5 games in hand on Buffalo. They actually have a positive goal differential in last place, if you can believe that. Great stuff, John. Thank you for the time here today. We'll catch up next Tuesday.
Yes, sir. Have a great day.
This great clip brought to you by, wait for it, Great Clips. It's going to be great.